Your groom isn't coming. I am." The words were whispered so softly against her ear that Isabella Reyes thought she had imagined them. She stood frozen before the full-length mirror in the bridal suite, her back still exposed, the zipper of her wedding dress half undone, and a stranger's hands resting on the fabric at her spine. She hadn't heard him enter. One moment, she had been alone, abandoned by her bridesmaids who had gone to check why the ceremony was delayed, frantically calling a fiancé who had stopped answering his phone 30 minutes ago. The next moment, she had felt hands on her dress, gentle and precise, and she had assumed it was her maid of honor returning. It wasn't. The man in the mirror was tall, dark-haired, dressed in a suit so perfectly tailored it looked like it cost more than her entire wedding. His face was handsome in a way that made her think of classical sculptures, all sharp angles and shadows, but his eyes were what held her paralyzed. They were the color of a winter storm, gray, cold, calculating, and utterly without mercy. "Don't scream." His voice was calm, conversational, as if he were discussing the weather rather than appearing uninvited in a locked room with a bride. "If you scream, my men outside will have to silence everyone in this church. Your grandmother is in the third pew. Your mother is in the first. I would prefer not to hurt them." Isabella's blood turned to ice. "Who?" Her voice came out strangled. "Who are you?" The stranger's hands moved slowly upward, drawing the zipper of her dress with them. The sound of the metal teeth closing, one by one, was impossibly loud in the silence. "My name is Marco Valenti," he said, "and in about 10 minutes, I'm going to be your husband. Now stop right there. I need you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications before we go any further. Because what you just witnessed is the beginning of something you cannot look away from. This bride has no idea what she's walked into, and the man zipping her dress is not who you think he is. Drop a comment right now telling me what you think is really happening here. Because I promise you, you're not going to guess it." 30 minutes earlier, Isabella Reyes had been the happiest woman in the world. She was 27 years old, a pediatric nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, and she was about to marry the man of her dreams. Daniel Crawford was everything she had ever wanted: kind, ambitious, devoted. They had met 2 years ago at a charity fundraiser, and he had swept her off her feet with his charm and his promises of a beautiful future together. Their wedding was modest by design. Isabella had never wanted anything extravagant, just family, friends, and the man she loved promising forever in a small church on the outskirts of the city. Daniel had insisted on handling most of the arrangements himself, claiming he wanted to surprise her, wanted everything to be perfect. She should have known something was wrong. The signs had been there if she had been willing to see them. The way Daniel would disappear for hours without explanation. The phone calls he would take in other rooms, his voice dropping to a whisper. The friends who seemed to appear out of nowhere. Men with hard eyes and expensive watches who called him Danny Boy and looked at Isabella like she was a curiosity rather than a fiancée. But she had been in love. And love, she was learning, made you blind to everything you didn't want to see. The first hint that something was wrong came at 2:15 p.m. The ceremony was supposed to start at 2 o'clock. Isabella's mother had knocked on the bridal suite door with a nervous smile. "Sweetheart, there's a small delay. Daniel's running a bit late. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about." But Daniel was never late. Daniel was obsessively punctual, the kind of man who arrived 15 minutes early to everything because he couldn't stand the anxiety of cutting it close. Isabella had called his phone. No answer. She had called again. Straight to voicemail. She had sent a text. "Daniel, where are you? Everyone's waiting." The message showed as delivered but unread. At 2:30, her maid of honor and bridesmaids had left to investigate, promising to return with news. Isabella had stood alone in the suite, watching the minutes tick by, feeling the first cold fingers of dread begin to wrap around her heart. That's when the door had opened. That's when the stranger had walked in. "What do you mean, you're going to be my husband?" Isabella's voice shook, but she forced herself to meet the stranger's eyes in the mirror. Marco Valenti. The name meant nothing to her, but the way he carried himself, the quiet confidence, the underlying threat, told her everything she needed to know. This was not a man who asked for things. This was a man who took them. "Your fiancé," Marco said, his hands now resting lightly on her shoulders, is not the man you think he is. His name isn't Daniel Crawford. It's Daniel Corsetti. He's the youngest son of the Corsetti crime family, a family that has owed mine a blood debt for 3 generations. Isabella shook her head. That's impossible. Daniel works in finance. He's an accountant. He's a money launderer. Marco's voice was flat. He washes blood money through offshore accounts for half the criminal organizations on the eastern seaboard. He's very good at it, which is why my family was willing to overlook his ancestry until 6 months ago when he made a very serious mistake. Isabella's legs felt weak. She gripped the edge of the vanity to keep from collapsing. What mistake? He stole from me. Marco's eyes hardened. $12 million skimmed from accounts he was supposed to be managing for my organization. He thought he was clever. He thought he could disappear before anyone noticed. Marco leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. He was wrong. Isabella's mind was racing. This couldn't be true. Daniel was kind. Daniel was gentle. Daniel had held her hand when she cried about losing patients at the hospital. Daniel had brought her soup when she was sick and flowers when she was sad. Daniel couldn't be a criminal. Could he? I don't believe you, she whispered. You don't have to believe me. Marco stepped back and pulled something from his pocket, a phone, which he held up to show her the screen. But you should believe this. The screen showed a video, grainy surveillance footage of a man at a computer terminal, his face clearly visible as he typed rapidly, transferring funds between accounts. It was Daniel. There was no mistaking him. The way he hunched over the keyboard, the nervous habit of pushing his glasses up his nose, the wedding ring he had started wearing 6 months ago, the ring Isabella had given him as an engagement present. She watched him steal $12 million. She watched him destroy everything she thought she knew about her life. The ring, she breathed. He was wearing my ring. He was wearing it when he ran too. Marco pocketed the phone. About 2 hours ago, he boarded a private plane to a country with no extradition treaty. He left behind his car, his apartment, and you. The word hit her like a physical blow. You. He had left her on their wedding day, surrounded by her family and friends, with 300 guests waiting in a church that now felt like a trap Daniel had run. He had abandoned her without a word. I'm sorry, Marco said, and there was something in his voice that almost sounded genuine. I know this isn't how you imagined today going, but I'm afraid your options are limited. Isabella turned to face him directly for the first time. Up close, he was even more striking and even more terrifying. This was a man who had killed people. She knew it with bone-deep certainty. He had killed, and he would kill again, and right now, he was standing in her bridal suite with the calm patience of someone who knew exactly how this would end. What options? She asked. Daniel stole from me. By the laws of my world, that debt must be paid. The original plan was simple. Kill him, recover the money. Send a message to anyone else who might be considering similar stupidity. Marco's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. But Daniel is gone. The money is gone. And I'm left with nothing to show for my trouble except a church full of witnesses and a bride who was supposed to be the cover story for his escape. Isabella felt sick. Cover story? He was going to marry you this afternoon, then disappear during the honeymoon. You would have woken up in some hotel room in Bali to find his side of the bed empty, his passport gone, and a note apologizing for things you wouldn't understand. Marco tilted his head. He was using you, Isabella, from the very beginning. You were never a fiancé. You were an alibi. The room spun. She reached for the vanity again, her perfectly manicured nails scraping against the marble surface, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. 2 years. 2 years of her life. It had all been a lie. Every kiss. Every promise. Every whispered, I love you in the dark. All of it performance. Manipulation. Strategy. She had been a pawn in a game she didn't even know was being played. Why are you telling me this? She managed to ask. Why not just do whatever you came here to do? Marco was quiet for a moment, studying her with those storm gray eyes. Because Daniel's escape has created a problem for me. His family will see it as a victory. The Corsettis outwitting the Valentis, stealing our money and disappearing without consequence. If I do nothing, I look weak. If I look weak, other families will test me. Pipa Vildi. He stepped closer. I need to send a message. A message so clear, so undeniable, that no one will ever consider crossing me again. And I'm a message? No. Marco reached out and took her hand, gently, almost reverently. You're the weapon. If that moment just made your heart stop, hit that like button. Because you're starting to understand what Marco is really proposing, and why Isabella's entire life is about to change in ways she never imagined. I don't understand, Isabella said. But she was beginning to. Daniel's family wanted this wedding because it made him look legitimate. A normal man marrying a normal woman. Nothing to see here. Marco's thumb traced a slow circle on the back of her hand. But what if, instead of fleeing, Daniel's bride married someone else? What if the Corsetti's elaborate cover story was hijacked by the very family they try to cheat? You want to marry me? To humiliate them. I want to marry you to send a message. The Valentinis don't just punish betrayal. We profit from it. Daniel tried to steal from me and lost everything, including his bride. His family will be a laughingstock. Their allies will distance themselves. Their enemies will smell blood. Isabella stared at him. You're insane. Possibly. Marco's expression didn't change. But I'm also your only chance of walking out of this church alive. The words hung in the air between them. What do you mean? There are 12 members of the Corsetti family in this church right now. They're here for the wedding. Daniel's cousins, uncles, associates. They don't know yet that Daniel has run, but they will very soon. And when they realize what he's done, when they understand that he's left them exposed and humiliated, they will need someone to blame. Marco's eyes never left hers. You are the obvious candidate. You're the outsider, the one who was never really part of the family. They'll convince themselves that you knew about the theft, that you helped him plan the escape, that you were in on it from the beginning. That's not true. Truth doesn't matter in my world, Isabella. Perception matters. And the perception will be that you betrayed them. They'll want blood. And in a building full of witnesses, with your entire family present, they'll have no choice but to act. Isabella felt the walls closing in around her. So my choices are marry you or die. Those are the most likely outcomes, yes. And if I marry you, then what? Marco released her hand and stepped back, giving her space to breathe. Then you become untouchable. No one moves against the wife of Marco Valenti. No one touches what belongs to me. The Corsettis will rage, but they won't dare retaliate. Not against you, not against your family. You'll be protected. For how long? That depends on you. Marco's expression softened slightly, the first crack in his armor she had seen. I'm proposing a marriage of convenience. A business arrangement. We'll stay married for 1 year. Long enough to stabilize the political situation, long enough for the Corsettis to accept their defeat. After that, we can discuss terms for a quiet divorce. You'll be compensated generously for your cooperation. And if I refuse? Marco was silent. His silence was answer enough. Isabella looked at herself in the mirror. This stranger in white. This woman whose life had shattered in the span of 30 minutes, whose dreams lay in pieces at her feet. She looked at the bouquet of roses waiting on the table, at the veil that was supposed to make her look like a princess, at all the trappings of a day that had been designed to be the happiest of her life. And then she looked at Marco Valenti, the man who had destroyed her illusions, the man who was offering her a different kind of future, one built on calculation rather than love, on survival rather than romance. The man who was, she realized with sudden clarity, the only person who had told her the truth today. If I do this, she said slowly, I want your word. Your real word, not just promises. I want to know that my family will be safe. That when this is over, I can walk away without looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. Marco nodded once. You have it. And I want to know why. Not the political reasons. The real reason. Why go to all this trouble? Why not just kill Daniel's family and be done with it? For a long moment, Marco didn't answer. Then, quietly, he said, because 3 months ago, I stood in a room very much like this one, watching my sister prepare for her wedding. She was so happy, so hopeful, so certain that the man she loved would never hurt her. His jaw tightened. It had hurt her. The Corsetti she married, Daniel's cousin, beat her so badly she lost the child she was carrying. When I found out, I destroyed him. But my sister, My sister is still broken. She can't look at a wedding dress without crying. She can't hear church bells without shaking. He met Isabella's eyes. I could kill everyone in this church and still not feel satisfied. But taking Daniel's bride? Making her mine? Turning his perfect escape into his greatest humiliation. He smiled, a real smile this time, dark and terrible and full of pain. That's the kind of revenge that echoes through generations. Isabella understood. This wasn't just business. This was personal. I have one more question, she said. Ask. If I say yes, if I walk down that aisle with you, will you ever lie to me? Marco considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I will keep secrets, he said finally. There are things about my work that you cannot know, things that would put you in danger if you knew them. But I will never lie to you directly. I will never make you a promise I don't intend to keep. And I will never, ever treat you the way Daniel did. He extended his hand. Do we have a deal? Isabella looked at his hand. At the door. At the mirror that reflected a woman she no longer recognized. Then she took a deep breath, placed her fingers in his, and sealed her fate. We have a deal. That's the end of part one. I know you're sitting there with your heart pounding, wondering what happens when Isabella walks down that aisle. Wondering what her family will think when a stranger takes Daniel's place. Wondering what secrets Marco is hiding, and what secrets Isabella herself might be keeping. Because here's the thing, you think you know who the victim is in this story. You think Isabella is an innocent bystander, swept up in forces beyond her control. But what if I told you? She's been lying too? If you want to find out what really happened, and why Marco chose this woman, on this day for this particular revenge, subscribe right now. Hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me whether you think Isabella should trust Marco. Let's continue. The walk from the bridal suite to the church doors was the longest of Isabella's life. Marco walked beside her, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a gesture that looked tender to anyone watching but felt like a brand burning through the fabric of her dress. Two of his men flanked them, silent and watchful, their eyes scanning for threats she couldn't see. Breathe, Marco murmured as they approached the entrance. You look like you're walking to your execution. Aren't I? Only metaphorically. There was a hint of dark humor in his voice. Try to look like a woman in love. The Corsettis will be watching. Isabella forced her expression into something that might pass for joy. It felt like wearing a mask made of broken glass. Every movement painful, every smile a lie. But then again, she had been living a lie for years. She just hadn't known it. The doors opened, and the church stretched before her. 200 faces turning to see the bride. The organ swelling with a wedding march. Sunlight streaming through stained glass windows to paint the aisle in colors that seemed too beautiful for what was about to happen. In the front pew, she saw her mother's face light up with relief. In the third pew, her grandmother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. And at the altar, where Daniel Crawford should have been standing, there was only empty space. Marco's hand pressed more firmly against her back, urging her forward. She walked. 1 step, 2 steps, the music swelling around her like a wave she couldn't escape. She saw the moment confusion began to ripple through the crowd. Saw guests leaning toward each other, whispering questions. Saw the Corsetti family members. She could identify them now by their hard eyes and expensive suits, exchanging glances of alarm. But no one stopped her. No one knew what to do, because this wasn't in the script. This wasn't how weddings were supposed to work. The bride was walking down the aisle, so something must be happening, something must be right, even if nothing made sense. She reached the altar. Marco took his place beside her, and the priest, poor Father Martinez, who had known Isabella since she was a child, who had been so honored to perform her wedding, stared at them both with undisguised horror. My daughter, he stammered, this is not. I don't understand the groom. The groom is indisposed. Marco's voice carried through the church with quiet authority. I'll be taking his place. Chaos erupted. Let me pause here for a moment, because I need you to understand what's about to happen. The church is in an uproar. The Corsettis are on their feet. Isabella's mother is screaming. And Marco Valenti, the most dangerous man in the city, is standing at the altar with a calm expression, waiting for the storm to pass. This is the moment where everything could fall apart. This is the moment where Isabella makes her choice. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because what happens in the next few minutes will change everything. Everyone sit down. Marco's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. It wasn't loud. He didn't need to shout. There was something in his tone, some quality of absolute command, that made bodies obey before minds could catch up. The standing guests sank back into their seats. The screaming faded to whispers. Even Isabella's mother, halfway out of her pew, froze mid-motion. Marco smiled, that cold, calculated smile that Isabella was beginning to recognize as his most dangerous expression. Thank you. Now, I'm sure you all have questions. Let me answer them efficiently. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone. The same phone he had shown Isabella in the bridal suite. Daniel Crawford, or rather, Daniel Corsetti, is not coming. He left approximately 2 hours ago on a private plane bound for a country with no extradition treaty. He took with him $12 million that he stole from my organization, leaving behind his car, his apartment, his family obligations, and Marco glanced at Isabella, his fiancée. The church went deathly silent. The Corsetti family has been aware of Daniel's activities for some time. They have benefited from his money laundering operations. They have protected him from the consequences of his actions. And now, they will share in the consequences of his betrayal. One of the Corsetti men, older, heavy-set, with the look of someone who had seen too much violence to be impressed by threats, rose slowly from his pew. "You have no right," he growled. "This is Corsetti business. The girl is Corsetti property. You can't just walk in here and the girl," Marco interrupted, "is standing right here. Perhaps you should ask her what she wants." Every eye in the church turned to Isabella. She felt the weight of those stares, her mother's confusion, her grandmother's fear, the Corsetti's barely contained rage. She felt the wedding dress suddenly too tight, the bouquet trembling in her hands, the veil that was supposed to make her look beautiful now feeling like a shroud. And she felt, beneath all of that, something she hadn't expected. Anger. Not at Marco, not even at Daniel, though that would come later, but at herself, at the woman who had spent 2 years believing lies because they were easier than the truth, at the woman who had ignored every warning sign because she was so desperate to be loved, at the woman who had built her entire identity around a man who saw her as nothing but a prop in his schemes. That woman was gone now, burned away in the 30 minutes since Marco Valenti had zipped her dress. What remained was someone new, someone harder, someone who was done being a pawn in other people's games. "My name is Isabella Reyes," she said, her voice carrying across the church with a clarity that surprised even her. "Not Corsetti, not Crawford. Reyes. I am not property. I am not a pawn. I am a woman who was betrayed by someone she trusted, and I refuse to be a victim of that betrayal for one more second." She turned to face Marco directly. "If marrying this man will protect my family, then I will marry him. Not because I'm forced to, not because I have no choice, but because I choose survival over suffering, and I choose to take control of my own life." She turned back to the crowd. "If anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me." The church was silent. Then, slowly, Marco began to clap. Not mockingly, respectfully. The sound echoed through the sacred space like gunshots, and one by one, his men joined in. Then, surprisingly, a few of the neutral guests. Then more. Within moments, the church was filled with applause. And the heavy-set Corsetti man, still standing in his pew, slowly sat back down. His face was purple with rage. His hands were clenched into fists. But he sat, because he had no other choice. Father Martinez performed the ceremony with shaking hands and a voice that trembled on every word. He didn't understand what was happening. He couldn't understand. This man, this stranger who had appeared from nowhere, was marrying the girl he had watched grow up, the girl he had baptized and confirmed and counseled through teenage heartbreaks. But Isabella had asked him to proceed, had looked at him with those steady brown eyes and said, "Please, Father, I need you to do this for me." So he did. "Do you, Marco Valenti, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part. Marco's voice was steady. Edo. And do you, Isabella Reyes, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Isabella looked at Marco. He looked back at her. And in that moment, something passed between them, something neither of them could name. A recognition, perhaps, an acknowledgement that they were both survivors, both casualties of wars they had never asked to fight. I do, she said. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Father Martinez's voice cracked on the final words. You may kiss the bride. Marco stepped closer. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. This was a business arrangement, a performance, a lie designed to save her life and serve as revenge. But when he cupped her face in his hands, when he tilted her chin up and lowered his lips to hers, it didn't feel like a lie. The kiss was brief, chaste even by wedding standards. But there was something in it that made Isabella's knees go weak, something that felt like a promise or a warning. When Marco pulled back, his eyes searched hers for a moment, looking for something she couldn't identify. Then he turned to face the church, one arm wrapped around her waist, and announced, Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Marco Valeni. The reception will continue as planned. The champagne has already been paid for. It would be a shame to waste it. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd, and Isabella stood at the altar, wearing another woman's wedding, married to a man she had met an hour ago, wondering what the hell she had just done. The reception was surreal. It was held at a venue Daniel had chosen, an elegant ballroom overlooking the harbor, decorated with flowers Isabella had selected, playing music from a playlist she had curated. Everything was exactly as she had planned, except for the groom. Marco moved through the crowd with the ease of a man who had spent his life commanding rooms. He shook hands, accepted congratulations, deflected questions about his relationship with Isabella with vague references to a whirlwind romance and love at first sight. The Corsettis had not come to the reception. Isabella had watched them file out of the church in silence, their faces masks of barely controlled fury. The heavy-set man, someone had whispered that his name was Victor Corsetti, Daniel's uncle, had paused at the door to stare at her. She had stared back. He had looked away first. It was a small victory, but felt like something. Now she sat at the head table, surrounded by her bewildered family, trying to answer questions she didn't have answers to. How long have you known him? Her mother demanded. Why didn't you tell us? What happened to Daniel? Bella, you have to explain. I can't explain right now, Mom. Isabella kept her voice calm, even though she felt like screaming. I promise I will tell you everything soon. But right now, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Her mother's eyes filled with tears. I always trusted Daniel. Look where that got us. The words hit Isabella like a slap. But before she could respond, Marco appeared at her side. Mrs. Reyes, he said smoothly, addressing her mother with a warmth that Isabella hadn't seen from him before. I know this must be overwhelming. I apologize for the unconventional circumstances of our marriage. But I promise you, I will take care of your daughter. She will want for nothing. She wanted Daniel. Her mother's voice was bitter. Daniel was a lie. Marco's tone remained gentle, but there was steel beneath it. I am not. Whatever else you may think of me, whatever you may hear about me in the coming days, I am not a lie. And I will never hurt Isabella the way he did. Her mother stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. You'd better not, she said, because if you do, I will find a way to make you regret it. Marco smiled, a real smile, one that transformed his face into something almost human. I believe you, Mrs. Reyes. I truly do. He offered Isabella his hand. May I have this dance, wife? Isabella looked at his outstretched fingers, at the wedding band that had appeared on his hand at some point during the ceremony. Where had that come from? At the face of the man who had turned her life upside down in the span of an afternoon. Yes, she said, you may. And she let him lead her onto the dance floor. They moved together in silence at first, swaying to a song Isabella didn't recognize. You handled that well, Marco said quietly. Your mother is formidable. She's protective. She loves you. She doesn't know me. The words came out before Isabella could stop them. Not really. No one does. Marco pulled back slightly to look at her face. What do you mean? Isabella hesitated. This was the moment. The moment she could choose to stay silent, to maintain the fiction of the innocent victim, to let Marco believe she was exactly what she appeared to be. But he had promised not to lie to her. Maybe she owed him the same courtesy. Daniel wasn't the only one with secrets, she said. He wasn't the only one pretending to be someone he wasn't. Marco's eyes sharpened. Explain. Not here. Isabella glanced around at the couples dancing nearby. Too many ears. But tonight, when we're alone, I'll tell you everything. 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 Marco studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled her closer, his lips brushing her ear as he spoke. I look forward to it, Mrs. Valeni. And that's the end of part 2. I told you there was more to Isabella than meets the eye. I told you this story wasn't as simple as victim and villain. Now the question is, what is she hiding? What secrets has she been keeping? And how will Marco react when he learns the truth? Part 3 is where everything is revealed, where the masks come off, where you finally understand why these two people were destined to find each other. If you want to see how this ends, and trust me, you do, subscribe right now. Hit that like button, and drop a comment with your theory about what Isabella is hiding. Because I promise you, the truth is more shocking than anything you've imagined. The hotel suite Marco had arranged was the most luxurious space Isabella had ever entered. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light across marble floors. The bedroom alone was larger than her entire apartment. The apartment she would never go back to, she realized. The apartment where she had planned a life with a man who had never existed. She stood at the window, still in her wedding dress, watching the lights of the city flicker like earthbound stars. Behind her, she heard Marco dismissing his security team, heard the door close and lock, heard his footsteps approach across the polished floor. You can take off the dress, he said. There are clothes in the closet. I had my assistant purchase some things in your size. We can retrieve your belongings from your apartment tomorrow. And if I don't have belongings worth retrieving, then we'll buy new ones. Isabella laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You think money solves everything. I think money solves many things. Not everything, but many things. She turned to face him. He had removed his jacket and tie, rolled up his sleeves to reveal forearms that spoke of physical strength beneath the elegant exterior. He looked less like a businessman now, and more like what he truly was. A predator, a killer, her husband. You wanted the truth, she said. Are you sure you're ready for it? I'm ready for anything. We'll see. Isabella moved to the sofa and sat, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the day was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness that made her want to sleep for 100 years. But first, she had a confession to make. My name is Isabella Reyes, she began. That part is true. I'm 27 years old. I work as a pediatric nurse, and until about 4 hours ago, I was engaged to a man I believed was named Daniel Crawford. Also true. She paused. What's not true is that I'm innocent. What's not true is that I was just an unfortunate bystander caught up in Daniel's schemes. What's not true is that I had no idea what was happening. Marco's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Continue. I met Daniel at a charity fundraiser, just like I told everyone. But what I didn't tell anyone, what I couldn't tell anyone, is that I was there looking for him specifically. She took a deep breath. My father was Antonio Reyes. He was an accountant, like Daniel pretended to be. But he wasn't just any accountant. He worked for the criminal underworld, laundering money, managing assets, keeping the books for people who needed their finances hidden from authorities. Marco's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 15 years ago, when I was 12, my father was killed, shot in the head in his own office. The police called a robbery gone wrong, but we all knew the truth. Someone he worked for had decided he was a liability. Isabella's voice remained steady, but her hands were shaking. My mother took us and ran. Changed our names. Built a new life in a new city. She never talked about my father again, never explained what really happened. But I remembered, and when I was old enough, I started digging. She looked up at Marco. It took me 8 years to find the truth. 8 years of researching, investigating, following paper trails that most people didn't even know existed. And do you know what I found? Tell me. I found that the man who ordered my father's death was Giuseppe Corsetti, Daniel's father, the head of the Corsetti crime family. The silence that followed was absolute. Marco stood motionless, his face carved from stone, processing what she had just revealed. "You targeted Daniel," he said slowly. "You sought him out specifically. The chance meeting at the fundraiser was not a chance at all. I planned it for months. I knew everything about him, his habits, his preferences, his weaknesses. I became exactly what he was looking for, a simple, kind-hearted woman who would never ask questions, who would be the perfect cover for his activities." Isabella stood and walked to the window, unable to face Marco as she continued. "I was going to destroy him. I was going to get close, gather evidence, find proof of his crimes, and then I was going to burn his entire family to the ground. Justice for my father. Revenge for everything they took from me." She pressed her forehead against the cool glass. But then something happened. Something I didn't expect. What? I fell in love with him. The words hung in the air like a curse. The real him, the man behind the performance, was nothing like what I expected. He was gentle. He was funny. He made me laugh, and he held me when I cried, and he looked at me like I was the most precious thing in the world. Her voice cracked. I started to believe that maybe the person he was with me was the real Daniel. That maybe the crimes, the money laundering, the family legacy, maybe those are the lies, and what we had together was the truth. She laughed bitterly. I was so stupid, so desperate to be loved, that I forgot why I was there in the first place. I let myself become exactly what he needed me to be: a pawn, a cover, an alibi. I let my guard down, and when he ran, she turned to face Marco. When he ran, I realized that I had been played from the very beginning. He knew who I was. He must have known. There's no way he would have gotten involved with me unless he'd done his own research, identified me as Antonio Reyes's daughter, and decided to use my obsession against me. She spread her hands. So there it is. The truth. I'm not an innocent victim. I'm a would-be avenger who failed. I infiltrated his life to destroy him, and instead he destroyed me. She met Marco's eyes. "Do you still want to be married to me? If you didn't see that coming, hit that like button right now." Because Isabella just revealed herself to be far more dangerous and far more broken than anyone suspected. The question now is, what will Marco do with this information? And why is he looking at her like that? Marco crossed the room in 3 strides. Isabella flinched, expecting anger, expecting violence, the way she had learned to expect violence from powerful men in her father's world. But Marco didn't raise his hand. Instead, he took her face in his palms, gently, so gently, and looked in her eyes with an intensity that stole her breath. "Do you know who ordered the hit on your father?" he asked. "I told you. Giuseppe Corsetti. Giuseppe Corsetti gave the order, but he didn't make the decision." Marco's voice was low, urgent. Someone else pointed the finger. Someone else decided Antonio Reyes was a threat that needed to be eliminated. Isabella's heart pounded. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that 15 years ago, my father was in a war with the Corsettis. A bloody, brutal war that nearly destroyed both families. Giuseppe was looking for an advantage, any advantage, and someone offered him one." Marco's hands tightened slightly on her face. "Your father wasn't killed because he was a liability. He was killed because he had information, proof of crimes committed by Corsetti rivals. And someone traded that proof, traded your father's life, for an alliance with the Corsettis." "Who?" Marco was silent. "Who, Marco?" "My uncle," he said quietly. "Salvatore Valenti. My father's brother. He made a deal with Giuseppe Corsetti. Information for influence. Your father's execution was the price of that alliance." Isabella felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "Your family killed my father?" "My uncle killed your father. My father didn't know. Not until years later, when it was too late to undo what had been done. When he found out, he exiled Salvatore, stripped him of power, spent the rest of his life trying to make amends for a crime he never sanctioned." Marco released her face, but didn't step back. "When my father died 3 years ago, He left me a letter. In it, he listed the sins of our family, the things done in our name that he could never forgive himself for. Your father's name was on that list. Antonio Reyes. He asked me to find a way to make it right. Isabella stared at him. That's why you know so much about Daniel. That's why you were watching the Corsettis. You weren't just protecting your business. You were looking for a way to atone for what your uncle did. I was looking for you. Marco's voice was raw. I didn't know where you were. Your mother covered your tracks well. But I knew you existed. I knew that somewhere out there was the daughter of a man my family had destroyed, and I swore I would find you. I swore I would help you get justice. Then Daniel stole your money and led me straight to you. Marco smiled, but there was no joy in it. When my investigators identified his fiancée as Isabella Reyes, when they traced your real identity, your father's history, your years of searching for the truth, I knew. Knew what? That this was fate. That everything, the theft, the wedding, the timing, had led me to the one person I've been searching for. The person I needed to find to fulfill my father's dying wish. Isabella felt tears burning behind her eyes. So marrying me, it wasn't just about revenge on Daniel. It was about protecting you, giving you the power to fight back, making sure you never have to be afraid again. He took her hands in his. I didn't plan for it to happen like this. I didn't plan for any of this. But when I saw you standing there in your wedding dress, alone and betrayed, and still so fierce, so unbroken despite everything, I knew I couldn't let you walk out of that church unprotected. I knew I had to give you what my uncle took away. And what was that? Marco lifted her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles. Power, he whispered. Justice. Choice. Isabella felt something crack open inside her. Something that had been frozen since the day she watched her father's casket lowered into the ground. She had spent 15 years building walls. 15 years hiding behind a mask of normalcy. 15 years planning revenge that always seemed just out of reach. And now, here was this man, this dangerous, complicated, beautiful man, offering her everything she had ever wanted. Not just vengeance, but partnership. What about love? She heard herself ask. Is that part of the arrangement? Marco was quiet for a long moment. Love wasn't part of my original plan, he admitted. But plans change. People change. He met her eyes. I've known you for less than a day, Isabella. I can't promise love. Not yet. But I can promise this. I will never lie to you. I will never betray you. I will never make you feel like you're not enough. He paused. And I will help you destroy the people who destroyed your father. The Corsettis. My uncle. Anyone who had a hand in stealing your life from you. Isabella searched his face for deception, for the kind of manipulation she had seen in Daniel, the careful performance of emotions he didn't feel. She found none. Only truth. Only pain. Only the same hunger for justice that had driven her for 15 years. Okay, she said. Okay. I'll stay married to you. Not for a year, for as long as it takes. We'll bring them down together. All of them. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. But I have one condition. Name it. No more secrets. If we're going to be partners, real partners, I need to know everything. Every plan, every operation, every danger. I'm done being kept in the dark. I'm done being protected from the truth. Marco studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. No more secrets, he agreed. From either of us. He extended his hand. She took it. And in that moment, standing in a hotel suite overlooking the city that had witnessed her destruction and her resurrection, Isabella felt something she hadn't felt in 15 years. Hope. Epilogue. 1 year later, the Corsetti family compound burned. Isabella stood on a hillside a mile away, watching the flames consume the mansion that had sheltered her father's killers for generations. Beside her, Marco was a silent presence, steady, solid, real. It had taken him a year of careful planning, of gathering evidence, of dismantling the Corsetti empire piece by piece. They had turned allies into enemies, exposed hidden crimes, destroyed the web of corruption that had protected Daniel's family for decades. Daniel himself had been found 6 months ago, living in a rented villa on the coast of Thailand, spending the stolen money as if it would last forever. Marco's men had brought him back in chains. The trial had been brief. The sentence had been severe. He was spending the rest of his life in a prison that didn't appear on any map. But it was Salvatore Valenti who had been hardest to destroy. Marco's uncle had gone into hiding the moment he learned of the marriage, understanding, perhaps, what it meant. But you couldn't hide from the Valenti family forever. Now when Marco was determined to finish what his father had started. They had found Salvatore 3 weeks ago. Isabella had been the one to pull the trigger. She hadn't hesitated. "How do you feel?" Marco asked now, watching the flames with her. Isabella considered the question. 15 years ago, she had been a child watching her father die. She had been powerless, voiceless, unable to do anything but grieve. Now she was Isabella Valenti, wife of Marco Valenti, co-leader of one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the country. She had blood on her hands and justice in her heart, and a husband who looked at her like she was the most dangerous, beautiful thing he had ever seen. "I feel free," she said. Marco's arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. "It's not over, you know. The Corsettis are finished, but there are others. There will always be others. I know. Are you ready for that? For a lifetime of this?" Isabella turned in his arms to face him. In the glow of the distant fire, his face was illuminated in shades of gold and red, beautiful and terrible, like an angel of destruction. And looking at him, she felt something she had stopped believing was possible. Love. Real love, not the manufactured version Daniel had sold her. Not the desperate longing for connection that had made her vulnerable to his lies. But something true. Something earned, something forged in fire and blood, and the shared pursuit of justice. "I'm ready," she said. "For all of it. For forever." Marco smiled. Not the cold, calculated smile she had first seen in the bridal suite, but something warm and genuine and full of promise. "Forever it is, then." He kissed her. Behind them, the Corsetti compound collapsed in on itself, sending a shower of sparks into the night sky. And Isabella kissed him back, tasting ash and triumph and the beginning of a life she had never dared to imagine. 3 years later, on the anniversary of their unconventional wedding, Marco presented Isabella with a gift. It was a file, thick with documents, photographs, and evidence that had taken years to compile. "What is this?" she asked, opening it. The last piece of the puzzle. Marco sat beside her on the balcony of their home. A beautiful estate that had once belonged to the Corsetti family, renovated now, transformed into something new. Every person who had knowledge of your father's death, every decision-maker, every collaborator, every silent witness who could have spoken up and didn't. Isabella flipped through the pages, recognizing some names and learning others for the first time. "There are dozens of people here. 63, to be exact." Marco's voice was soft. "We've already dealt with 15. The rest, that's up to you. Some are dead already. Old age, illness, the natural course of things. Some are too powerful to touch directly. Some might not deserve punishment. They were foot soldiers, following orders, not making decisions." He took her hand. "This is your choice, Isabella. Your father. Your vengeance. I'll support whatever you decide." Isabella looked at the file. 15 years ago, she had wanted to burn the world. Had dreamed of destruction so complete that nothing would remain of the people who had destroyed her family. But that was before Marco. Before she understood that vengeance without purpose was just another form of destruction. One that would consume her the same way it had consumed the people she was hunting. "I don't want to spend my whole life chasing ghosts," she said slowly. "I don't want to become so focused on the dead that I forget to live." She closed the file. "The ones who are left, let them live with what they did. Let them spend their remaining years knowing that someone out there knows the truth, that someone could come for them at any moment, and they would have no defense." She looked at Marco. "That's worse than death, isn't it? Living in fear, never knowing when the reckoning will come." Marco smiled. "My father used to say that the cruelest punishment isn't what you do to your enemies. It's what you make them do to themselves. Your father was a wise man. He made mistakes, but yes, he was wise." Marco pulled her close. "And he would have been proud to know you. proud that his son found someone worthy of carrying on the family name. Isabella leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. "What now?" she asked. "If not vengeance, then what? Now we build something, a legacy that isn't just about blood and power and the settling of old scores. Something our children can inherit without shame. Children, if you want them." Marco's voice was carefully neutral, but she could hear the hope beneath it. Isabella smiled. "Ask me again in a year." "I will. I know." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the city they had claimed as their own. 3 years ago, Isabella Reyes had walked into a church expecting to marry one man and ended up married to another. She had expected to die that day, or to lose everything, or to be consumed by the flames of a war she never asked to fight. Instead, she had found something she never expected: a partner, a purpose, a love that was forged in fire and refined by time. She had walked down the aisle with a stranger who whispered that her groom wasn't coming, and she had discovered that sometimes the unexpected arrival is exactly the one you were waiting for all along. And that is the end of our story. If you made it this far, you understand what this was really about. It wasn't just about revenge or power or the downfall of evil men. It was about two broken people finding each other in the wreckage of their lives and building something new from the ashes. Isabella spent 15 years hunting the people who destroyed her father. Marco spent years trying to atone for a crime his family committed. And when they found each other, when a stranger zipped her wedding dress and changed her life forever, they discovered that the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's transformation. It's taking the worst thing that ever happened to you and turning it into the foundation of something beautiful. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe in the possibility of finding love in unexpected places, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment telling me what moment hit you the hardest. Share this with someone who needs to believe that their story isn't over, that the plot twist they didn't see coming might be the beginning of their greatest chapter. And remember, sometimes the person who saves you isn't the one you were waiting for. Sometimes they're the one you never saw coming. I'll see you in the next one. The greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's transformation.